these emergencies, as consequential as they are to be declared, what are the metrics? Is it an eyeball test? Is this an art and not a science? Is it solely at the discretion of the president? What is your knowledge of how these declarations are put together and what the metrics are to measure whether they rise to that occasion? Kevin, let's start with you.
I'm not an expert on this topic, but I'll happily talk about it because I'm on a podcast.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not an expert on anything. That's why
fantastic.
You guys are here.
Great company. But my reading of them is it really does largely depend on, it's whatever the president decides is an emergency. And it's one of the many ways in which Trump has exposed that for much of this country's history, we kind of operated on the honor system.
Oh, dear God.
We kind of assumed good people would be there. Or the genius of Madison was maybe they're not all going to be good people, but everyone will be power hungry for their own position and will fight with each other and check each other's powers that way. And so Congress has neutered itself here and made themselves useless. But yeah, it really is up to, it's in the eye of the president. And unfortunately, we have someone who's hallucinating.
Jill, is there any recourse to this?
I think it's worse than that because I think we're basically we're in the mountain head dilemma at this point, right? The problem with emergency...
Very hip reference, Jill Lepore. Throwing out some streaming references.
I watch a lot of TV. I think that one of the problems with the sirens are blaring all the time, right? I think especially for people who are extremely online, which is a lot of people, it's very difficult to know from your own vantage, is there an emergency or not? So earlier, Kevin said, everything's fine in LA. There's no problem in LA. Is that true? I'm not sure I know that that's true. I've seen a lot of footage that's very concerning. If I were the convenience store owner, or those guys went in and looted and dragged out all the stuff, it's not okay in LA, right? Was it necessary to send in the Marines and a Federated National Guard? I don't think so, because my news sources are really downplaying the violence. In the way that I would say the news sources I rely on really downplayed the violence in the summer of 2020. And also said, although public health guidelines say you shouldn't be in large gatherings and you should always be masked, we'll make an exception for the George Floyd protests because those are so important. And there's no violence. No, there's no violence.
Right. So it depends on...
It turns out that was wrong. So
right. What universe you're in.
If you can't tell if there's an emergency, partly because everything's always an emergency, and also because your news sources are going to take a partisan position on whether there is one or it's not one. Do you believe Gavin Newsom or do you believe Donald Trump? Do you believe Fox News? Do you believe the New York Times?